Hello, friends, and welcome to the Two for Tuesday podcast, brought to you by Second Round Music. I'm your host, Michael Pezent, and today we begin our journey in a two-part series into the fourth generation of country music, starting with the 1970s, and we'll jump into the 80s in part two next week. Now, the 70s was a decade of rebellion and crossover. Country music's establishment, with its polished Nashville sound, came under fire once again, but this time from the rising outlaw movement, while at the same time a wave of crossover stars brought country into pop mainstream like never before. In this episode, we'll explore the stories behind two unforgettable songs: John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads, a country pop anthem that went global, and Kenny Rogers' The Gambler, a story song so iconic its chorus became part of everyday life. Now, we got a lot to cover, but before we do, check out this message from our sponsor, and I'll catch you on the other side. Are you ready to take control of your finances and build a brighter future? Are you sick and tired of being sick and tired, feeling broke all the time? My name is Michael Pezent, a certified master coach, and I created Second Round Financial to provide personalized financial coaching based on the proven principles of Dave Ramsey's 7 Baby Steps. Our services include, but are not limited to, one-on-one financial coaching through Zoom conference or face-to-face, budgeting strategies, debt reduction plans, emergency fund creation, retirement planning, and investment guidance. Well, why choose us? Because we believe in empowering our clients with the knowledge and tools they need to achieve financial peace. With our guidance, you'll gain clarity over your financial situation, develop a realistic and achievable plan, and experience hope and confidence in your financial future. I have over 15 years experience teaching and guiding families in the Ramsey principles, along with a degree in finance and work experience in the banking and insurance industries. So let's get started today. Go to secondroundfinancial.com and click Book Now to schedule your free consultation today. The 1970s arrived with country music at a crossroads. Nashville's hit formula of the 1960s, the smooth Nashville sound with lush strings and polished production that we've talked about, was about to face another rebellion, a movement brewed among artists who craved creative freedom from Music Row's formula. Now, they would come to be known as the Outlaws, and they injected country music with a dose of rock and roll attitude, and it got back that honky-tonk grit. As country historian Craig Morrison noted, outlaw country was an escape from the formula constraints of the Nashville sound, mixing Hank Williams-style honky-tonk with folk storytelling and rock rhythms. Spearheaded by renegades like Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson, this movement stood up to the industry establishment. To us, outlaw meant standing up for your rights, your own way of doing things, Waylon would later say. In the early 70s, Waylon Jennings and Willie Nelson both bucked the system. Willie, frustrated with Nashville, returned to his home state of Texas in 1971, grew out his hair, and found a receptive audience at Austin's hippie country scene. The venues like the Armadillo World Headquarters, long-haired hippie rednecks mingled with Willie's raw, heartfelt style, and it flourished. Meanwhile, Waylon fought for control over his sound at RCA Records. In 1973, he released Lonesome, Ornery, and Mean, and Honky Tonk Heroes, back-to-basic albums that became touchstones for the outlaw movement. Now, over the next few years, Waylon scored a string of number one hits, including Are You Sure Hank Done It This Way?, a tribute to Hank Williams that openly critiqued Nashville's slick ways. Now, that song, with its driving beat and honest lyrics about rhinestone suits and the never-ending lost highway, became an outlaw anthem, a rallying cry for artists who wanted to make music their own way. The outlaw artists traded their string sections for twanging Telecaster guitars and often recorded with their road bands instead of session players. The rough edges were intentional, and in 1975, Willie released his landmark Red-Headed Stranger album, and it was a concept record about a fugitive preacher with such sparse production that Columbia Records feared it would sound like a demo tape. But Willie's instincts were right, and the album single, Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain, captivated listeners with its simplicity and soul. The Gentle Waltz, a Fred Rose song from the 1940s that Willie delivered with only a guitar and a backing piano. And it became Willie's first number one hit, and it introduced millions to his soft, understated vocal style. The Red-Headed Stranger album, initially deemed too uncommercial, became a multi-platinum smash. Clearly there was an audience for authentic country storytelling. By 1976, the Outlaw ethos was so popular that the compilation album Wanted, The Outlaws, featuring Waylon, Willie, Tom Paul Glasser, and Jesse Coulter, became country music's first certified platinum album. The Outlaws were now officially mainstream, a fact that both thrilled and worried them. Even Waylon even poked fun at the trend in 1978 with, "Don't you think this outlaw bit's done got out of hand?" And it was a song that was inspired by his own run-ins with excess and the law. Yet even as scruffy outlaws were crashing the party in Nashville, a very different strain of country music was also reaching new heights in the 70s. And this era saw country pop crossover achieve unprecedented success. Glossy, radio-friendly hits brought country's themes to a broader pop audience. For example, in 1970, Lynn Anderson scored a huge crossover smash with Rose Garden, and Charlie Rich and Glenn Campbell carried on the countrypolitan style with hits like Behind Closed Doors and Rhinestone Cowboy. Perhaps no one exemplified country music's mainstream appeal better than a former folk-singing Air Force brat from New Mexico, John Denver. With his gentle tenor voice and a sunny, nature-loving lyrics, John Denver became an ambassador for country-flavored pop in the early 1970s. And in fact, he won the CMA Entertainer of the Year in 1975. And that was a controversial choice to some hardcore country fans at the time. But it was a testament of how widely country music's reach had grown. Mountain blowing like a breeze, country road, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, country road. One of the defining country pop hits of the 1970s was John Denver's Take Me Home Country Roads. It was released in 1971, and this song became an anthem far beyond the country genre. Ironically, it was written by two musicians who had never even visited West Virginia, the state so lovingly described in the lyrics. Songwriters Bill Danoff and Taffy Nivert were inspired by a road trip and a stack of postcards from a friend who had traveled through West Virginia. They penned a poetic homage to the rolling hills and open highways, initially intending to pitch the song to Johnny Cash. But when John Denver heard it, he was immediately captivated. And after an all-night jam session in Washington, D.C., where John was performing at the Cellar Door Club, and Danoff and Nivert opened for him, the three writers finished the song together. John knew they had struck gold. He later recalled the electric reaction from the audience the first time they performed Country Roads live that night. And by the end of the show, all three agreed that they had created something special. So John quickly moved to record it. And in January of '71, he cut the track in New York City for his sophomore album, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. And unlike the lavish Nashville production of the day, the recording was relatively simple, built around John's warm acoustic guitar strumming and an uplifting country folk melody. RCA Records released the single on April 22nd, 1971, and it soared up the charts. The song peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in August of 1971, a remarkable achievement for a country song at that time. And it sold over 1 million copies within a few months, earning a gold certification in August. Now, Country Roads would eventually become certified platinum decades later as its legacy continued to grow. And interestingly, the song didn't top the country charts in '71. John Denver was still seen as a folk pop artist by many, but it did introduce many pop listeners to country themes, and its popularity became enduring. Over the years, Country Roads became one of John Denver's most beloved signature songs, selling 1.6 million digital copies in the United States, even in the 21st century. So what makes Take Me Home Country Road so influential? For one, its imagery struck a chord. With just a few lines, Denver and his co-writers conjured a longing for peace in the rural life. Almost Heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. This romantic vision of the American countryside appealed to people far and wide. In fact, the song became the official state anthem of West Virginia in 2014. Its chorus, Country Roads, Take Me Home to a Place Where I Belong, is simple, direct, and emotionally resonant. Musically, the song fused the gentle country vibe with its acoustic guitars and a hint of twang in the backing vocals with a pop-friendly sing-along chorus. It was country enough for the rural audience, and it was polished enough for the suburban radios. This crossover appeal meant that Country Roads opened the door for other country-flavored hits on pop radio. Since I restarted my quote-unquote music career, this song has been a staple on my set list and a crowd favorite for the last 4 or 5 years. Now, the song's legacy only grew over time. It's been covered by more than 150 artists across genres. Everyone from Olivia Newton-John to Ray Charles has sung it. In fact, songwriter Bill Danoff has said one of his favorite covers was Ray Charles' soulful rendition. And in sports and culture, it became a beloved sing-along. West Virginia University plays it after football victories, for example. And just recently, in 2023, Country Roads was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Recording Registry as a recording of historical significance. All of this from a humble tune written on a Washington, D.C. winter's night by a trio of inspired young songwriters. Country Roads proved that in the 1970s, a country song could capture the whole world's imagination with its sincerity and charm.
On a warm summer's evening, on a train bound for nowhere, I met up with a gambler. We were both too tired.
Now, on a warm summer's evening, on a train bound for nowhere, an old gambler offers a young stranger a bit of life's advice. Advice that would echo across country music history. Now, that vivid scene comes from The Gambler, a 1978 classic that became Kenny Rogers' career-defining song. It's hard to imagine Kenny's recording or acting career without that familiar chorus. Know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em. So we're going to take a deep dive into the story behind The Gambler, from its humble origins to a struggling songwriter, and through multiple near misses and unlikely twists to a massive hit that won Grammy Awards, inspired TV movies, and embedded itself into American pop culture.
You got to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run. You never count your money when you're sitting at the table. There'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done.
Now, our story begins not with Kenny Rogers, but with a 23-year-old songwriter named Don Schlitz in the summer of 1976. Now, Schlitz was a new face in Nashville, working the graveyard shift as a computer operator while chasing his songwriting dreams. Now, guys, this is Don Schlitz, a country music songwriting legend who's going to get his own episode in a show somewhere down the road. So now back to the story. One August night, after meeting with his mentor, Bob McDill, Schlitz was walking home along Music Road when inspiration struck. And in the span of about 20 minutes in this walk, he composed most of the story song in his head. He was quoted as saying one time, "I wrote most of it in my head, but I had no idea what was going to happen. Now, the song told the story of two strangers on a train, and one of them an old gambler, trading whiskey and wisdom in the darkened night. However, Schlitz initially lacked a final verse, and for weeks he pondered how to end this tale. And finally he settled on the ambiguous, haunting conclusion that the gambler quietly breaks even by passing away in his sleep, leaving the narrator with his philosophical advice. Yet even Don wasn't sure if the unusual song made sense. He was quoted once again saying, "I thought it was an interesting story, but it was a throwaway," he admitted. He would later say that he felt almost mystically guided in writing The Gambler. The lyrics seemed to come from someplace beyond himself, perhaps even from his late father. Once again, he was quoted as saying, "Something more than me wrote that song. There was something going through my head, which was my father. It was inspired by and possibly a gift from him." Now, he also was quoted in saying later on, "I really had no idea where the song was coming from. 6 weeks later, I received the final verse. It was possibly a gift from my father." Now, Schlitz was reflecting on his dad, who had passed in 1976. Now, armed with a completed song, Schlitz began shopping it around Nashville, but he quickly discovered that the brooding narrative ballad broke a lot of country music rules. It was longer than the typical radio hit. It had an unconventional structure, a chorus with no actual love story, and it centered on gambling metaphors and a dying mentor figure. And in the late 70s, that made for a tough sell. He was again quoted as saying nobody would touch it. Many in the industry just didn't see it as a hit, and this moody poker parable with no obvious romantic angle. Now, for 2 years, The Gambler made the rounds on Music Row, passed over by artist after artist. But the song did gain a few champions who believed in its potential. One of them was the legendary songwriter Shel Silverstein. And in 1978, Silverstein urged country artist Bobby Bare, known for his storytelling songs, to give The Gambler a chance. Now, Bare took that advice, and he became the first major artist to record The Gambler. And he included it on his album that was released in April of 1978. Now, most people probably didn't know that. Now, Bare's rendition was a straightforward reading of the song, a solid interpretation, but it lacked the dramatic flair that would later make it famous. Now, crucially, Bare's version was never released as a single, so it remained a deep cut on his album. Now, around the same time, Don Schlitz decided to record the song himself under his own voice, and The Gambler made a brief appearance on the country charts, and it peaked at number 65 in 1978. Now, it was a modest success, but it wasn't a breakthrough. In fact, by late 1978, it seemed half of Nashville had taken a crack at The Gambler. Even Conway Twitty's son, Michael Twitty, reportedly released it under the pseudonym calling himself Charlie Tango, and yet the song still hadn't found its definitive voice. It was going to take a bit of luck and timing, appropriately so, for The Gambler to land in the right hands. Well, that lucky break came via producer Larry Butler, one of Nashville's most respected producers of that era. Butler had an ear for hits and a willingness to gamble on unique songs. And in '78, he happened to be working on two parallel projects, a new album with rising crossover star Kenny Rogers and another bona fide legend, Johnny Cash. Butler believed in The Gambler, and he brought it into the studio for both artists to record. And what happened next is the stuff of music industry lore. Two very different outcomes for the same song. Now, first up, Johnny Cash, who recorded The Gambler in July of 1978 for his album, Gone Girl. But by most accounts, Cash's heart just wasn't in it. The sessions were troubled. Johnny was reportedly under the influence and openly disliked this song, clashing with Butler over the arrangement. And in the end, Johnny delivered a half-spoken, monotone performance that even his legendary charisma couldn't save. And the backing track, it lumbered dully, and the magic of Schlitz's storytelling just fell flat. Johnny's Gambler became a footnote tucked away in his album with little fanfare. Most fans then, and now, hardly realize that Johnny Cash ever even recorded this song at all. But Kenny Rogers was a different story. At the age of 40 years old, Kenny was enjoying the late 70s hot streak. Hits like Lucille had made him a crossover star, but some of Music Row whispered that his popularity might be waning, and Kenny himself wasn't even sure if he could top his most recent successes. Still, when Larry brought the Gambler to him, Kenny recognized something special in that song. He liked the cinematic storytelling, and he decided to record it and truly make it his own. Kenny approached the Gambler like an actor going into a character, and he gave it a spirited vocal performance, warm and fatherly in the verses and soaring in the chorus. To bolster the song's drama, Butler and the studio band added clever touches not written in Schlitz's original demo. Now, they crafted a dynamic arrangement with an unexpected key change. It's a half-step modulation just before the second verse, and subtly that heightened the tension. Now, during the final chorus, they introduced a powerful call and response breakdown, Kenny singing the famous lines and a chorus of background singers echoing him, as if to put the listener right inside the train car as the Gambler's dispensing his wisdom. Now, these arrangements flourished, and it brought the story to vivid life. Even Don Schlitz, the writer, was impressed with the makeover his song had received. And years later, Don praised Rogers and Butler's interpretation, saying that they added several ideas that were not mine, including the new guitar intro that kicks off the record. Indeed, that finger-picking acoustic guitar riff at the top of the Gamblers, soft, suspenseful, like the start of a campfire tale, was a completely new idea in the Rogers version, and it set the mood instantly, before Rogers' voice could even get started. And what a team Kenny had behind him in the studio. The song was cut at Jack Clement's recording studio in Nashville, with a roster of A-list session players giving it a rich, authentic country sound. Now, on acoustic guitars were Ray Edenton and Jimmy Capps, and they strummed a gentle rhythm, and Nashville legend Pete Drake's pedal steel guitar swelled in the background. Billy Sanford laid down the electric guitar licks, while veteran bassist Bob Moore anchored the low end, and it was augmented by Tommy Alsop on something called a tic-tac bass, and it gave it a little bit of that percussive snap. And also the great Hargus Pig Rollins played the piano, and drummer Jerry Kerrigan kept a subtle train-like shuffle on the drums. For a final touch, Larry brought in backing vocalists that included members of the Jordanaires. Now, you remember them. They're the famed backing vocalist of Elvis. And they hummed the harmonies. And he even invited Kenny's close friend and frequent duet partner Dottie West to sing backup on the choruses. Now, there's an intriguing footnote here. Now, even after the recording of the song, Kenny Rogers almost gave the Gambler away. Kenny was good friends with his country outlaw peer, Willie Nelson, and he initially thought Willie's storytelling style might suit the song better. And as Willie later revealed, Kenny tried to get me to record the Gambler. The two pals were chatting one day when Rogers played the song for him, and he said, "I think you should do it." And Willie loved the song, but he ultimately turned it down. He went on to say, "I thought it was a great song, but I was doing a song every night called The Red-Headed Stranger, which has 100 verses, and I just didn't need another long song on my set." Now, with a laugh, Willie remembered telling Rogers no, to which Kenny replied, "Okay, I guess I'll record it myself." And he did, thankfully. With a definitive version recorded and Larry Butler's blessing, Rogers claimed the Gambler for his own, and in October of 1978, he released the Gambler as his lead single and title track from his upcoming album. And that song that no one had wanted was about to prove everybody wrong. Now, the Gambler hit the radio again in fall of 1978, and listeners instantly connected with its timeless chorus and story. And by December, the song was racing up the charts, and it ultimately reached number 1 on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart, solidifying Kenny's dominance in country music. But it didn't stop there. In an era when country songs rarely crossed over to pop, the Gambler broke into the mainstream peaking at number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100, and even hitting number 3 on the adult contemporary chart. Virtually overnight, Kenny Rogers had a signature hit that appealed to country diehard fans and pop audiences alike. Critics and the industry took notice as well. Kenny's soulful storytelling earned him a Grammy Award for Best Male Country Vocal Performance at the 1980 Grammys, and Don Slitt's faith in this song was vindicated when the Gambler won the Grammy for Best Country Song, which is a Songwriters Award. Now, the song was also nominated for the overall Record of the Year, and the Gambler album earned a Grammy nomination for Album of the Year across all genres. In other words, this little country story song had become a heavyweight contender on the world stage. Now, beyond the trophies and the charts, the Gambler earned something perhaps even more valuable. It became part of the cultural fabric. Listeners felt like they knew the character and his advice by heart. Radio stations played this song incessantly, and Kenny's warm delivery of the lines like, "There'll be time enough for counting when the dealing's done," gave fans goosebumps. It was a song you could picture like a movie in your mind. And indeed, Hollywood was paying attention also. Now, a little bit more on that in a moment. Now, for Kenny, the success of the Gambler was career-changing. He had already been a star, but now he ascended to a new level of fame. He suddenly had an iconic persona, and the silver-bearded storyteller, a card player with a twinkle in his eye and a hard-earned wisdom in his voice. The song's popularity helped drive album sales through the roof, and the Gambler album eventually sold over 35 million copies worldwide. It's one of the best-selling country albums ever. Now, it also launched a remarkable run for Kenny, as the Gambler became one of 5 consecutive #1 country singles he would achieve heading into the early 1980s. Far from slowing down, Kenny was now at the absolute peak of his career, with crossover hits and even pop culture clout that few country artists at the time could ever match. It's amazing to think that just a year earlier, Kenny wondered if his hit-making days were behind him. And the Gambler not only proved that there was plenty of fuel left in his tank, it gave him a signature song that would define his legacy. And as a fan, I find it interesting to know just how close this song came to slipping through the cracks, and how perfect Kenny's rendition turned out to be. It's one of those moments of fate in music history. Now, the Gambler didn't just top the charts. It became a cultural phenomenon. The song's instantly recognizable chorus and life lesson lyrics seeped into the nation's consciousness. Quotes from the song entered into popular lexicon, especially the Gambler's mantra, "You got to know when to hold 'em and know when to fold 'em." People use that phrase as proverbial advice in all sorts of situations beyond cards: business, sports, and everyday life. To this day, saying, "know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em," is shorthand for savvy decision-making, a testament as to how widely the Gambler has been absorbed into American culture. Now, the song's story and popularity were so strong that they soon jumped off the turntable and onto the TV screen. In 1980, just 2 years after the song's release, Kenny Rogers made his acting debut as Brady Hawks. Now, that's a character loosely based on the song's Gambler, and it was a made-for-TV movie. The film imagined a Wild West backstory of a mysterious card shark and was a ratings success. It even won an Emmy Award, proving that the Gambler's tale had legs beyond a song. Success bred sequel. Kenny reprised the role in 4 follow-up TV movies over the next decade: The Gambler, The Adventure Continues in 1983, The Legend Continues in 1987, The Gambler Returns, The Luck of the Draw in 1991, and The Gambler 5, Playing for Keeps in 1994. Through these films, an entire franchise was born from the song, expanding Kenny's celebrity into the world of acting and firmly entrenching the Gambler as more than just a song. It was now a modern folk legend. Meanwhile, Kenny Rogers enjoyed the spoils of pop culture icon status. He guest starred on The Muppet Show in 1979, performing the Gambler in a memorable segment alongside Muppet characters, bringing the song to a whole new audience of kids and families. Decades later, Kenny even poked fun at himself in a popular TV commercial. In a 2014 Geico ad where he sat at a poker table irritating the other players by singing, "You Gotta Know When to Hold 'em," over and over. It was a hilarious nod to a now universally known song. From sitcoms to dramas, references to the Gambler have popped up in countless TV shows and movies. For example, it's been quoted or featured in episodes of King of the Hill, The Office, American Dad, and even more in recent years. Even the world of sports took a shine to it. The now defunct USFL team, the Houston Gamblers, adopted the song for obvious reasons, and you'll still hear it blasted in stadiums when the team takes a big risk. In the world of gambling casinos, the song's presence is quite literal. There are slot machines themed after the Gambler with Kenny Rogers' likeness, winking at the players as the chorus rings out with each spin. It's perhaps the ultimate full circle for a song about wagering. Now the Gambler's helping you gamble. Over the years, the Gambler has garnered prestigious recognition for its enduring significance. And in 2018, the song was selected for preservation into the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. Now, this honor is reserved for recordings deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. And the Gambler certainly fits the bill. Now, by then, the song was 40 years old, and it's still as beloved as ever. In fact, when Kenny Rogers passed away in March of 2020, fans immediately revisited his song, sending the Gambler to #1 on the Billboard's digital sales chart that week, providing a timeless appeal. Now, for general music fans and country music enthusiasts alike, the Gambler remains a treasure. It's a song that works on many levels: a catchy country tune, a character sketch, and a philosophical lesson in disguise. Its legacy is evident every time someone at a bar starts singing the chorus and the whole room joins in, or when a friend offers the right advice, know when to walk away. This song gave Kenny Rogers an identity and legacy that lasted an entire lifetime. Now, 5 decades have gone by, and we're still riding the train with the Gambler, hearing the words of wisdom from Kenny's voice. Hey guys, thank you for listening today, and I hope you're enjoying this podcast. If you are, please subscribe or follow the podcast, click the like button, share it with other music lovers, and please consider giving it a 5-star rating so we can reach a bigger audience. Now back to the show. So there you have it, the 1970s, a decade when country music split into 2 more directions. The rebels and the crossovers. Outlaws like Waylon and Willie carved out freedom, while stars like John Denver and Kenny Rogers carried country music to the masses. Now, next time we'll move into the 80s, where an urban cowboy turned country into a cultural fad, and Randy Travis led the revival back to tradition. So I'm your host, Michael Pezent, and this has been the 2 for Tuesday podcast, brought to you by Second Round Music. Thanks for listening, and remember, we love you and we need you. And whether it's a gambler's advice or a country road calling you home, this music will always tell your story. See you next week for part 2. God bless you.